Hey everybody. Hey, I wanted to share that I ran across this interesting magazine called American Forestry in my attic. I'm not exactly sure where it came from or how I got it, but it's fascinating to read about the deforestation and forest fire concerns of 1921. Anyway, as I was flipping through the pages, I found an American Express money order tucked inside along with a torn out piece of newspaper. It appeared to be bookmarking a specific article about woodchucks and porcupines. But what really caught my eye was the amount. This money order was for just 29 cents. I started wondering, what was this all about? Was it a refund, a mistake, or was it something else entirely? This money order was issued by the Abraham Fur Company in St. Louis. Being a metal detectorist, my first thought was, did they ever distribute trade tokens or watch fobs? I started digging and found a picture of a triangular watch fob with a raccoon on it. In the early 1920s, coonskin coats were the ultimate status symbol for Ivy League students and young men driving Model Ts. I wonder if they got a free raccoon watch fob like this with every purchase. But these coats weren't cheap. They sold for anywhere between $325 and $450. That's a staggering amount when you realize a brand new Model T cost about $310. A young man wearing one of these was literally wearing the price of a car on his back. But further digging gave me a sharp turn in my perception of Abraham Fur. The company wasn't a retailer of fine furs. It was a high-volume raw fur house. They were based in St. Louis, which at the time was the home of the International Fur Exchange, literally the fur capital of the world. They didn't sell fashion. They bought raw, bloody pelts from trappers across North America. They would receive thousands of shipments a day by rail. These skins were graded, scraped, and salted right there in the warehouse before being auctioned off to the manufacturers who made those expensive coats. So about that raccoon watch fob, it wasn't for the buyer of the coat. It was a loyalty item for the rugged trappers who sent a high volume of pelts to Abraham. It would have been a badge of honor for the men doing the hard work in the field. To get a sense of the history of Abraham furs, I found this 1926 advertisement celebrating their 50th year in business. This was no fly-by-night operation. I also found a letter, well, most of one anyway, signed by Leopold Abraham. The money order was signed by L. Abraham. G, the president of the company, must have kept a tight grip on the company's finances, personally authorizing payments as low as 29 cents. The recipient of this 29-cent windfall was a man went by the name Joseph S. Klinger. I'd love to know who he was, where he lived, and what his life was like. But most importantly, I want to know what kind of back-breaking work he had to do in the freezing winter of 1921 to earn a check that wasn't even worth a quarter and a nickel. There was one major clue that so far I'd overlooked. It was that bookmark, a scrap torn from the Columbus Dispatch. Following that trail led me to Joseph S. Klinger. The 1920 census placed him 100 miles north of Columbus in the tiny village of Burgoon, Ohio. His occupation simply listed as agriculture. In 1920, Burgoon was a community of just 198 people. Today, it's 178. It's a place frozen in time, surrounded by the same endless fields Joseph worked a century ago. That scrap of paper provided another vital link. It was a bookmark for an article on woodchucks and porcupines. To Joseph Klinger, these weren't just destructive animals, they were a source of revenue. Long before the digital gig economy of Uber or TikTok, Klinger ran a gritty side hustle as a trapper. He made his living in the shadows of the woods, earning his keep by controlling the local varmint population. Companies like Abraham Fur would buy virtually any animal pelt a trapper could ship. While a prime mink, otter, or raccoon was the big score that could pay the bills, the real bread and butter of the industry came from lower tier critters. Trappers across the country relied on high volumes of common animals. They were the everyday currency of the fur trade. Individually, they weren't worth very much, but you know the saying, it all adds up. And I'm not kidding when I say any animal. There was even a category for house cats. By 1921 standards, a house cat pelt might fetch you 15 cents. But the groundhog, it sat even lower on the ledger. Also known as a woodchuck, it was the ultimate budget fur, often paying so little that shipping the pelt cost more than the pelt was actually worth. I'm assuming that our Joseph Klinger shipped off a small batch of those lower tier pelts, maybe 3 or 4 groundhogs, and was hit with a wave of disappointment when he opened the mail to find a 29-cent money order for all his trouble. On the one hand, he had successfully rid his farm of a pest that dug under his barns and wreaked havoc on his crops. But on the other, his winter side hustle, at least on this shipment, had barely paid for the postage it took to ship the furs. And here's the kicker. If you take a close look at the check, there's no bank stamps, there's no cancellation holes, there's nothing on the back. He never actually cashed the money order. He simply tucked his 29-cent payout inside an American Forestry magazine sitting on his table and walked away. He promptly forgot about it, and there it laid, undisturbed for over a century. And what of our 32-year-old farmer? Well, Joseph Klinger stayed right there in Sandusky County for the rest of his life. He lived to the ripe old age of 86. He outlived the fur empire of Leopold Abraham, he outlived the 1929 market crash, and he lived long enough to see the world change in ways he couldn't have imagined when he was out checking those traps in the snow. He may have forgotten his 29 cents, but a century later, his story is finally being told. If you learned at least one thing today, hit the like button. If you didn't learn anything, tell me what I missed in the comments so I can do better next time. And thank you very much for watching.